I'm going to try a fun little warm water fly. This is the red-faced wobbler. Came out, I'm going to say the first time I saw this was in Fly Tire magazine 13, maybe 15 years ago, something like that. Been around for a while. If you have seen, I did a video a few weeks back on Harry Murray's fly called the Strength. This fly is almost just like it from the standpoint of it's just a marabou tail, a palmered body that's trimmed to, a tapered shape with a hackle on the front of it. But this is a little bit different because the body's all synthetic and the hackle on the front, this is designed to be fished more as a streamer type fly than the Strength, which can be fished as a streamer or a nymph. The hackle on the front gives this a kind of a wobble in the water because it presents a broader flat face to the flies. That's why it's called the wobbler. And popular colors for this are the pearl like this, the white, baitfish color, chartreuse, orange are all good, and even black. The one thing that's consistent on most of them is they all have the red hackle on the front. Now I suppose you could change that up to something else. Give it a try. This is the red-faced wobbler. Like I said, it's a great warm water streamer, and I'll get started tying. Start the red-faced wobbler by placing my hook in the vise. This is a Mustad R75 in a size 6. It's a 5X long, actually it's about a 4X long streamer hook. You could use something a little shorter if you want. I tie these in basically a size 4 through 8, maybe a 10 if I'm wanting to go after some panfish or something, but mostly 4s and 6s. I'll debarb the hook. You don't have to do the next step, but I like to add a little bit of weight to these just to help get them down a little bit. I'm going to put on about a dozen wraps of some lead-free, 0.020 lead-free, where this is 0.025. You vary up the lead, the number of wraps and the size of the lead wire depending on how fast you want it to sink or how deep you want it to sink. So there's 12 wraps. Smooth that off. Squish all of that together. And then I'm going to place it kind of forward of the midpoint. Attaching my thread, I'm using a white UTC 140 Denier on this. You're going to have to really kind of do some cranking on some of this Estaz body material. I want to use something a little bit heavier. Attach my thread about an eye length behind the eye of the hook. Wrap down to the lead wraps and then open up my wrap and softly wrap over the lead till I get to the back. And then here I'm just going to secure that in so that lead is not going to shift on the hook shank. On the back side here, I don't have to worry about getting a thread dam to taper that up, but on the front I do. As I'm wrapping the body material in on the front, I don't want to have that ledge right off the end of those lead wraps. I want to have it smoother so that I don't end up with the body material dropping off that ledge and having a little bit of a gap in it. The reason I don't have to worry about it in the back is because I'm going to have a marabou tail, and when I tie in that marabou, I can wrap it up to just behind the lead, trim it off, and it will basically increase the diameter of the back of the hook shank here to the lead, so I'll eliminate that little ledge there. Red face wobbler you can tie in different colors. The standard is a white marabou, tail, and a white Estaz body. But you can tie these in an olive or even a chartreuse color. The only thing that usually is consistent is the red hackle on the front. So I'm going to get a nice, fairly full marabou tail, or excuse me, marabou feather. I'm going to measure that about a hook length long, and I'm going to tie that in right here at the end of the shank. I want to secure that down nice and tight. And then, as I said, I'm going to wrap forward just a little bit. And then trim away the excess here. And that will bring up the diameter a little bit. Should have trimmed that a little bit longer, but no matter, because I can fill that up with a little bit of lead. Or, excuse me, not lead, thread. So if I had trimmed that marabou a little bit longer, closer to those lead wraps, it would have filled that area up a little bit better. But I was thinking of something else and trimmed it a little too short. Putting my thread back down to the end of the shank, I'll tie in my flashabou. I misspoke there. It's not flashabou, it's a crystal flash that's tied in. You could put some flashabou in this. I mean, there's no rules that say you can't, but I'm using some pearl crystal flash, and I'm going to get 4, maybe 5 strands, and I'm going to wrap those in and pull those so that the ends here are just past the tail a little bit. I'm going to wrap forward on the hook shank and then start wrapping back down, and then I can take the crystal flash from the other side and bring it over to the opposite side of the hook shank and bind it in so it is right along the side of the tail. I'll trim those so they're just past the marabou. These I'll clean up just a little bit. And we're ready for our body material. As I said, the body on this is some Estaz. This is a pearl Estaz in a large size, or I think they have it packaged as a Grande. I'm going to tie this in right at the back, at the end of the shank, or at the base of the tail, and wrap forward. Now, there's 2 things about wrapping this body in that you have to be careful of. One, you don't want to get too far forward on the hook shank. I'm going to stop and tie that in and have at least a couple of eye lengths behind the eye of the hook, simply because there's going to be a red hackle palmered up here, and then you still need to have some room for the head of the fly. The second thing is, when you're wrapping this Estaz in, every now and again you want to stroke these fibers back so that they're not laying along the hook shank and get trapped in with the next wrap. And then also every now and again you want to give it a little bit of a tug. Brace the hook, give it a little bit of a tug, because you want the core of that Estaz, each wrap, to be tied up in front of the previous one. In other words, you don't want to have this wrapped in an open spiral. You want all of that closed up. Kind of tedious, but when we trim this to shape, we will end up with a fuller body. is tempting when you get up to the front here to want to put in one more wrap like that, but if you do, you're going to be filling this space up too much. Then the head is going to start coming over the eye of the hook. So try to resist that and just go ahead and tie that in. Secure that down with some nice tight wraps and trim away the excess. I'm going to secure that all down right here. And then I'm going to put in a 3 or 4 turn whip finish and remove the white thread. Now I used white thread on this simply because it's a white fly, with the exception of the head of the fly and the red hackle on the front. If I used a red thread throughout all of this, you actually would see some of it down at the base. So just to keep it consistent, if I were doing this in a chartreuse, I would have used a chartreuse thread at this time, just to keep the coloring all the same. You're going to end the fly in a moment with a red hackle palmered up on the front of the, I should say, wrapped in as a collar up on the front, and some red thread. But for now, I just used the white because at this stage we have to trim the body. This is why you're using the Grande Estaz, because you need these fibers to be much longer. You could probably on a smaller hook, say a 10, maybe an 8, but definitely a 10 or 12. You could get by with the regular sized Estaz. But these 4s and 6s, you got to use the larger stuff to get the right body. All I'm doing here is just combing this a little bit, trying to get any of the flash fibers that might have gotten wrapped in a little bit or covered up or squished down or whatever as I was wrapping that body in, get those fluffed out a little bit. What we have to do is trim this in a kind of a conical shape like a bait fish. You're really going to have some nice sharp scissors for this, and just take your time with it. If I were tying up a bunch of these, say a half dozen or a dozen of them, I would actually tie all of them to this point, and then I would take all of these either outside or in the garage somewhere, even on a kitchen table where it's nice and clean. You can trim all these and then wipe up all the trimmings, because once you trim these things, you're going to have glitter and flash all over the place. If you do it at your tying desk like I am, then you're going to have a mess to clean up. It's easier if you're in the garage, like I said, or out on the back deck or at the kitchen table where it's all nice and clear and you can just vacuum it up, wipe it up, whatever. So we're going to start this like any deer hair bug, or if you watch the video I did on Harry Murray's shrimp recently, the rabbit body, it's kind of the same thing. You're going to sculpt this and you're going to trim a little bit off at a time. I'm wanting to keep this kind of a round face here, and it's going to stay round all the way through, but it's going to taper down in. So for me, the easiest is to start in here in the back, because I'm going to narrow that up and then work my way back out. You can easily trim off too much on this, and I would say you're probably better off just leaving it, kind of fat than having it too thin. So even like right now, I'm getting that kind of cone shape to it, and if I wasn't certain, I might just leave it just the way it is right now, and that would be fine. I would err on that side rather than let's take a little more off and a little bit more off, and next thing you know, you've got a real skinny little bait fish. see, you've got little trimmings that come off of this all over the place. And that's almost the shape I'm looking for. Try not to trim your crystal flash out. Take your time with it. And that's pretty much kind of the shape you're looking for here. Now the face of this, I'm going to trim just a little bit, kind of bringing this around forward. I want to try and keep that flat face on this because it's that broad flat face with the hackle in front of it that makes this kind of wobble in the water as you're fishing it. Whether you're swinging this or stripping it back in a little bit, current hits that, water hits that flat face and it causes it to kind of wobble from side to side. Fluff this back and forth a little bit just to make certain I don't have any real long flash fibers sticking out like that one right there. Even if you do, that's fine. I think it fishes a little bit better when it's a little ragged. Has a little bit more flash to it, sparkle, what have you. There you go. You can always keep trimming more, but at some point you just have to say enough is enough. So now I will attach my thread. My red, I'm just using a Danville 6/0 in red. I'm going to attach this right behind the eye of the hook. So you're going to use the thread here to smooth all of this off a little bit. That's still going to be where my head is at right there. But where I'm moving back now is going to be where the hackle's palmered in. So I want to make certain that that's fairly smooth. This Estaz, you tend to get kind of a lumpy, bumpy body on it. So I need to smooth this area off just a little bit. My thread right at the back of that space is where I will tie in the red hackle. Anytime, feel free to throw a little bit of head cement in here just to help hold things together. And as I mentioned, I'm just using, this is a Rooster saddle hackle, like a bass or salt saddle hackle in red. I want to get a fairly long feather because I want to get at least 5, maybe 6 wraps on here. But you do have to be careful because I don't want these barbs being too long. I want the barbs to be just past the diameter, or I should say the radius of that circle or face a little bit. That's a little bit long, that one is. So you just get a few feathers out and just try them. That's more what I'm looking for. I'm going to stroke back the barbs near the tip like this, trim that off, and then tie that in. Securing that in real well. I'll have my thread back at the back here. Grab my Hackle pliers. Glitter all over my hands. And start wrapping that in. And you just want to have these each wrap tight up against the previous one. It's just a collar we're putting in, but those stiff hackles with that Estaz behind it is going to give it a nice kind of a broad face again to help the fly wobble in the water. I want to make certain you're not getting any barbs trapped under each wrap. Once you get 4 or 5 wraps tied in, go ahead and secure the hackle. And trim away the excess. Stroking all of those barbs back out of the way, I will bring my thread down to the eye of the hook. Kind of a mess. And then start making the head. Now, I want the head come all the way back and kind of wrap those barbs in a rearward direction up against that Estaz. Pick out some of these barbs to make certain that they didn't get wrapped down in and trapped or anything. The hackle ended up being a little bit long, but it'll still fish very well. So smooth all this off in the head. We'll put a 6 or 7 turn whip finish in here. To secure that. And want to make certain none of those hackle barbs are trapped. And some head cement. Okay. So that is the red-faced wobbler. You can still trim on this thing all day long pretty much. You do want a nice sharp pair of scissors because even though these anvils are great scissors, often when I'm trimming these, the fibers will actually come between the two blades and they'll just fold over. So you want to make certain you've got a really, really nice sharp pair of fresh scissors. That's the red-faced wobbler. As you can see, it is similar to the shrimp that I did a video on a couple weeks back, but it is a nice warm water streamer pattern. If you like swinging woolly bugger type flies, even clouser type flies to smallmouth, or I don't see why you couldn't catch some trout with some of this, but largemouth bass, things like that, red-faced wobbler is a very fun fly to fish and to tie. There you have the red-faced wobbler. Thanks for watching today. Thanks for joining me at Devise today. I hope you learned at least a new pattern, if not a new technique, maybe a tip or trick here and there. If you have any questions about this fly or any of the techniques used in constructing this pattern, please leave them in the comments section down below. If you go to the trouble to ask a question, I'll go to the trouble to answer it. If you'd like to help dressed irons, please share this video with your friends and anybody you think that might enjoy this pattern. Until next time, remember, it's fly tying. If you're not having fun, then you're doing it wrong.